have, right? But until we get through a year or two, it is just that, an estimate that is that way. And so we have been, CRC was told that it could assume the use of that 100,000 for this program. But we were hesitant to assume the full use and get and make an estimated and a fee-based recommendation using all of it, just in case our estimates and calculations were slightly off. And so the goal was to find a number that was comfortably within that margin, I would say. It was how I would put it.
The way I read the spreadsheet, if I read it correctly, that was submitted, it was assuming more of it would be used, or a good part of it would be used. But unless the revised spreadsheet came out differently.
Yeah, Andy, when I did it, I didn't try to use the 100,000. I tried to get them really close, which is when I went to the threshold of 10 for inspections. And, you know, on what Bob said of trying to minimize for if you say those with not very many properties, if you did under 6 or 6 or less, the original one we had was, if you weren't owner occupied, it was 250 plus another 50 for each of the other 5. So it was 550 to register, and that would be every year. And then the first year inspection was 150 and another 150 for each of the units. So another 50, it's 2,000. So trying to go lower on the registration fee. So since and have the inspection cover more, but have the number of inspections we're doing not be as high, allowed you to go lower on the inspection fee, while still covering costs. So it is definitely interactive with how often we're inspecting. And I have no problem with inspecting every unit for the smaller ones, and what's smaller, under 10, in the first year. And then those, I'm hoping a huge number of them get the 5-year dispensation, that they're fine. The owner occupied ones, and not. Some places completely exempt owner occupied altogether from inspection, and we exempt them from the unit fee. So I think that's why I got to the more complicated of when do we start, at what point are we inspecting every unit, and when do we start sampling? And that's in the bylaw. That's not, we wrote that into the bylaw. We didn't leave that for later determination. I mean, that's the bylaw we're looking at in terms of regulations. So it was trying to reduce for the problem free. So Bernie, I know at one point you said if someone owns 2 or 3 properties, they're not necessarily low income, but if they own 2 or 3 properties and they're keeping them up, they've got great tenants, we're not trying to burden them either. That's an okay small business to be in, having a few properties you're operating for rental. We would like to go after the people that the owners that don't pay any attention to the condition of their property in terms of what it does to the tenants, and they don't pay any attention to what it does to the neighborhood in terms of they're only supposed to be 4 and there are 8 people living there with 8 cars and with trash. You know, so that's what I think that was why we started on this whole trying to figure out which those are. And being able to get inside the house to see what else is the home, to see what else is going on.
Lynn?
Yeah, I want to go back to just, again, having not frankly had time to look at this. Are we charging appropriately for the service we're providing versus are we not doing that? And this is an issue that's been brought up by, you know, some of the owners of these properties. In other words, we're we're charging for a service we're providing, and it's not a tax? It's a question.
And, you
Yeah,
know,
Bernie,
I see
Bernie,
Bernie's hand is up. The answer right now would be our rental permit collection fee collects more than just the rental permit registration, but it's including the inspection. You know, so it could be, if you say that's the package deal, we are inspecting houses. We're just not inspecting them until there's a complaint. So Bernie, you know, but I think aligning those fees with costs is really important.
Bernie,
I mean, you can't parse out the staff that you have a department, and you have to pay for the department. You have to pay for those people who are involved in the program, whether the program means an initial license or an inspection or a follow-up or whatever. So again, you got to make sure that you're covering the costs. And coming down to whether we use the $100,000 from UMass or not, I mean, I can see using that money in the initial year to help get things started, because we're not going to get 100% of our money collected. And we're going to end up doing more inspections than we probably planned on for a variety. That's because life works that way. But in my my simple world of municipal finance, there's hard money and there's soft money. Hard money is what you know you can raise. Soft money is what comes in on a variable basis or can go away. And that's the UMass money. So if we're going to have a program, it should be self-sustaining. And if UMass gives us money, then that gives us the opportunity to enhance the program in some way without raising the fees, or it gives us the opportunity to cover for those unanticipated expenses or for emergencies. So whatever fee structure we use needs to cover the costs.
Lynn,
And I think Lynn's point is, and not generate a surplus. It needs to be, if otherwise it looks like a tax. We need,
Well, none of that's not exact. Any program that the town operates has got to cover its costs. And if we have an excessive amount of money over that we earn over covering our costs, that's an issue. And that's regardless of what we do.
the
I mean, we
challenge.
can't, what you can, and the DOR will allow you to add on some costs to cover things like capital improvements, equipment repair, unforeseen circumstances. So if your fees are covering 105, 110% of your costs, the Commonwealth is not going to be concerned. The Commonwealth being DOR. If you're now all of a sudden coming in on 120, 125% over, you're going to hear from the state and they're going to tell you to back off. So, you know, nobody, I've been part of the nonprofit world for a long time. And, you know, for-profit corporations get to make a profit. Not-for-profit organizations need to retain revenue. And if you have a system where you are guaranteed that you're going to lose money year to year to year because you haven't covered your costs or you haven't given yourself a little bit of a cushion, you're not doing the taxpayers any service. You're constantly scrambling to make this stuff up. So again, whatever table we use has to cover our costs. And nobody likes to pay taxes. Nobody likes to pay extra for services. You know, it was real nice when you could go to the town clerk's office and, you know, get something notarized for free. Can't do that anymore. But that's the fact of life. You gotta be able to keep that program running. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox.
Mandy, was there an indication from Rob about whether it would take the full 5 years to do the initial inspection on all units, or did he anticipate that he could do that in less time?
He anticipated that with the let me look up the number of inspectors. With his estimate of needing, I believe it was 3 inspectors, that they would be able to, as the document is written, as the regulations and bylaw are written, be able to complete all required inspections to issue permits. So all of the permit inspections within 5 years. That is how he made his estimate for doing that. I did want to add, Kathy's been talking about, well, if we reduce the number of inspections needed for the large ones and all, we can reduce the number of inspectors. I would hesitate to assume that is true until talking to Rob, or how much you can reduce until talking to Rob. I can't answer that myself. Rob would have a much better idea of if there's a reduction of X number of inspections required under the bylaw, could the estimated number of inspectors needed be reduced. I cannot answer that. Rob should be able to answer that, based on things. So, but his estimation was 3 inspectors for this program would cover the ability to do all of the required inspections within 5 years. And that, I think his estimate included an estimate of the required inspections and his guess at how many would need follow-up inspections. So not just the raw number of 300 inspections or whatever, but how many would, him guessing with how many are we going to have to go into a second time because there are violations and stuff. I think that was his estimate, that he could fully do the program, the startup program, in 5 years with 3 inspectors.
And I say that in part because I had assumed that if we used the UMass money for startup, and no matter whatever number of years we want to make the assumption for, that helps us get it going, and that once we've gotten the initial inspections done in all units, if the program is successful, the number of inspections required should decrease. And then the number of inspectors required might be adjusted by administrative decisions, but not until we've completed the first round.
Yeah, I think that's his assumption. I can't totally speak for him, but he was looking at the first 5 years, full inspections of every unit at least once. And then I believe he would then reevaluate and look at that. But he was looking at startup 5 years and inspectors needed for that.
Which is why I think that I would put forward that we should consider using the UMass money to help control other costs for the startup period, and make the assumption that once they've made the commitment to it, as they have with other commitments they've made, like the supports they've given for fire EMS, that if they see that it has value to their students as well as value to the town, that they will have a motivation to continue to provide that money, and that would help. So I guess that I'm more comfortable making that. I don't know if others are. And then the question is, can we come up with enough fees to make it balance? And I did have the same problem that Kathy was describing. Given the numbers that you work with, then how it plays out in the spreadsheet is that if you have to make a much bigger change to inspection costs to make a significant difference in the bottom line than anything you're doing for the registration fee, which is paid annually and paid over all units, not just the units being inspected. Mandy, you're muted though.
Thank you. Sorry. The fee sample that CRC recommended, the 100, the 250, and then the 150 for inspections per unit, requires as a base revenue, using $15,000 of the 100,000 on estimate from the safe and healthy neighborhood revenue. So using a small portion of that, if you up the max number of, right, and that's with a cap, a guardrail of 10 units on the additional fee for the permitting. If you up that to 15 from 10, and you decrease the base permit fee for all parcels that are not owner occupied from 250 to 200, you are using $57,000 of the safe and healthy neighborhood revenue, instead of $15,000. So you're a little lower. But if you decrease that all other parcel permit fee to 150 and keep the cap at 15 units instead of 10 units, you would need to use more than the 100,000 because you'd be $13,000 short. So increasing that cap, as Kathy had initially proposed, does allow for a slight reduction in the permit fee. I haven't played with increasing the cap and then potentially reducing the inspection fee. But that was all keeping the inspection fee at $150 per unit. But increasing the cap for the permit fee to 15 from 10, essentially.
But I guess the other thing that I just wanted to recognize, and that is that I think that we generally make an assumption that landlords, when they have added costs, whether it be because of tax increase or utility cost increase or whatever, they try and get that paid for by their customers, through their tenants, so that what we do here is going to affect some rents, if not all rents. And so when we think about our people we represent a lot of renters.
I would also suspect that those increased costs could be written off as a business expense in the taxes.
Exempt from debt? Is that what you said? You're muted again.
And get the microphone button work. I would think that if this is an increase in their business expenses, that might be something that can be written off. So they may not have to pass on all or any cost, but that varies from person to person. We don't know.
Lynn?
Oops, excuse me. I wanted to ask Paul, but I'm not sure I know he's around, but I believe the UMass agreement that we just signed is a 5-year agreement, but actually in effect it's 4 years. And does that mean, Paul, we're 3.5 years into it, or where are we on it?
So we're in year 2.
Okay. All right. But we can assume, based on the fact that we have this written agreement, that we do have the money from UMass for at least 4 years.
Depending when you implement this.
Yes. Right. Well, true. Exactly. Thank you.
and the other uses that we can think of for safe and healthy neighborhoods, spending press as an example, because we could be using our CRESS responders to help address problems that are in neighborhoods and work with tenants. Certainly our community safety police officer has been doing that, and trying to work with renters to make sure that they know what they need to do to comply with the law. There may be programs that come out of other departments like public health, for example, that may also contribute. So we do have other things that we spend money on that can affect safe and healthy neighborhoods.
Mhm.
So I don't want to make an assumption that there's no other use for the money.
Right.
Lynn?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that for that particular piece of money, we know how long it's available. Thank you.
So we need to figure out what to do as far as a recommendation or recommendations. I think that there's two models that are out here now. One is the model that CRC has recommended, and I tried to play around with the spreadsheet to see if I could make changes in that would have significant effects. And aside from a slightly increasing the number of units that are covered, so that somebody who's really in the business is paying a little bit more, and for people who have just one renter in a unit, that we try and help that person out a little bit, because that's more likely to be just the single home that's being rented, but nobody's really actively in the business. It just happens to be one rental. So I played with that, and I couldn't make it that it would make a big difference without major shifts. So I really appreciated CRC's dilemma when they said, okay, now we got to get some help on this and get somebody else to look at it. The other model that and it's very helpful that Kathy has done that work, because she suggested something that would be a more significant change, but it carries implications with it too, some of which are not really within the control of the committee. They can only be something that's recommended by the committee. Kathy, and then Bob.
Okay, as Mandy pointed out, what I did affected two sections. The registration fee assumed you stopped charging for the incremental unit once you hit 9. If you make that 15, you get more from the registration fee program. So Andy, you're right. There's no way of playing with this if you don't do something on those lines. So in going down on the fee, I went up on the units, and I literally picked 15 because I was targeting a certain amount of money. It wasn't a 15 is the right number. And I looked at, as I said, a few cities. 15 would be $900 if you had a 100-unit place, so it's not huge to register it. So if you pick 20, you'd get even more with that marginal. And then when you go down to inspections, the only way to change the frequency of inspections is to look at the bylaw. You can change the fee, and as Mandy said, to get to 100% coverage of the cost, if I didn't go up to more units in the fee, in the registration fee, you had to go up for a lot in the inspection. So that's when I started looking at changing the threshold. So of course, her numbers are right, because Mandy knows how to work with a spreadsheet. But when you plug them in, if the cost of running the program, which we were given, is $478,000 with 3 inspectors, then that's your target, and you're either short a little bit or you're short a lot, or you're short more, but you're not short 100,000. You're not short 100,000. So we've got some wiggle room in looking at these just in the spreadsheet alone. So I never was quite sure when this was referred to us, whether there was a genuine request to change the fee schedule or just to say, what do you think about it? So I went in to try to change the fee schedule, trying to lower the impact on the properties with fewer units. And I figure a problem property is going to get hit with re-inspections. So that's where their costs are going to be much higher. And we want their costs to be higher. And it's higher because of the inspection costs. So we want that to be true. So I have no problem with a higher re-inspection fee, just because you only need a re-inspection if you had a major re-inspection, if there was a big problem. And years ago, I wanted a 1, 2, and 3 strikes are out. If you didn't clean up your act after a few years, we shouldn't have them on the books anymore. But in any case, just really thinking that. So that's where mine went. But to make it balance completely, I have to go to the bylaw, Mandy, on what's the threshold for starting to do every single unit. And if you don't lower it from 25, there is a shortfall if we don't go up on the inspection fee. And so going up on the inspection fee then hits the small property, I've only got 3 or 4 units. So the first year becomes more pricey. So I was trying to hold the 150 when the second time I looked. So those are, as I said, those are conceptually where I went. Whether 10 is the right number, 10 just reduced the number of inspections by a lot that were required, is why I went to 10. With a minimum of 10, with the right to do more in the properties that have, remember, this is more than 10 units in the same building. So it's a pretty big place when you look around town. So you've got 2 different possibilities, starting with what CRC presented to us. So I know where I would want to go with it, but I have no idea what the rest of the committee thought we were supposed to do, other than play with the spreadsheet.
Bob?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate or echo what Andy, you said, that you really can't, and Kathy, to some extent, you can't reduce the fees significantly with putting, unless you take limits off of specific parcels and, apply the fee to every unit within the pot. You just can't do it. There's no way that there's enough wiggle room in the equations to do that. So and I understand why we don't want to hit every unit with a fee, that we'll exclude some for the larger units. That's fine, but we're not going to get to what I would consider to be an ideal situation as long as we have a limit. We've put a maximum number of units per for fees. So I think as I said, the most recent version of this is closer to what I would think is, what I would like to see. It's better than what we first saw. So I think we have succeeded somewhat in reducing the cost to those individuals with smaller numbers of properties, or smaller numbers of units. We could probably do a little more, but it's going to be hard without increasing the number of units per landlord that we're willing to apply a fee to.
And that's what it's the cap of 9, Bob, on the first line in the red.
Right.
And so if you go up to 15, you can go down on it's what you're saying. Then you can go down on the initial fee,
Right.
and And the place that only has 3 units will never, and the cap of 9 doesn't raise the cost that much for a truly big one. You know, a 100-unit one, it's, you know, it's clearly raises the cost for someone with 6 or 8 units because you were capped at, or 10 units. So I picked 15 just to get that revenue up enough
Yep.
to make it possible to have the numbers work. So we're down to only one variable that really matters that interacts with the registration fee. Otherwise, what CRC gave us worked. You know, they had a registration fee if it was non-owner of $250, which is pretty substantial if you're, you know, if then you own 5 other units. So going down to 150 required me to go up on the number of units, you know, instead of 9. And thank you for giving us the interactive, because I found the cell buried in another place that where it said 9 and I could turn it into 15. So thank you for allowing that possibility.
So would the change that you're proposing serve only a fee purpose, or would it also, what would it do to the purposes of the bylaws stated in the bylaw?
So to go super slowly, the fee on registration, if you go down on the initial fee and go up on the total units, you're collecting more money when people register. As
Right.
Mindy said, if you don't change the bottom line, you're short, would you say 50,000 or something dollars? So you'd have to subsidize more than they did if you left the inspection fee at 250. So that's when I started looking at the threshold. But you know, Mandy did the quick math. If you just did what I did up on the other line, you know, the inspection costs are the big costs. So we had, I'm sorry to do this, I'm number driven, but the inspection costs were 340,000 and the fee registration costs were 138, and that's what got you to 478 total. That's the one you're constantly looking at. So if you do something on the top, unless you go up to more units, you know, then not 15, but you go to 20. So more collection at the registration, but you're only collecting it on the really much bigger units, you're going to be short some money that could be the UMass money, but you're not short $100,000. You're short something less than that. If you want totally balanced, you go to the threshold, I think, that we start doing every unit. But as Mandy said, Rob would have to tell us if that instead of 3 full-time inspectors is 2.75 or something in steady state. And the weird way I read the Boston one, they have a list of possible inspectors when they need more that they call on. So they didn't staff up for everything. They have this is a certified inspector when you need it. And they actually give the property owner an option of, you want one of ours or one of the certified lists. But that's the issue, Andy. You know, I was just trying to do make the registration fee less onerous for small number of units by increasing the cost to the large number of units, the places with 25, 30, 40 units. It doesn't increase the cost a lot for them. But, and you know, when you register a place with 100 units, if you need to know, is it a 1-bedroom, a studio? Is it a this? How many are in every one? It's got to be more fields that you're setting up. It may not be more staff time, but there's just more units. And then that triggers, how are you going to inspect those places? So hopefully that's clear, you know, so that variable, that cap of 9 drives a shortfall if I try to lower the fee. If I go to 15 or if I went to 20, you don't have to have any shortfall from what CRC gave us. So that doesn't require going to how often we inspect. And Mandy, you might say, why did you choose 25 at as the beginning point for sampling. Why not 20? Why not 10? It seems like whatever the point is for sampling is when you get to the bigger buildings, you don't feel a need like you have to inspect every unit. So there were enough at 10 that I decided 10 was as reasonable a threshold as 25. There aren't a lot of buildings with those size that you jump way up to 100 then, or 50. So 25 seemed to me as arbitrary as 20 or 10. So going lower would reduce. But as Mandy said, that interacts with the bylaw. That interacts with the bylaw.
So Lynn, when do you expect to do the second reading on the bylaw?
It's scheduled for Monday, but it's dependent on having a fee schedule that is recommended. So if this fee schedule is recommended, or a fee schedule is recommended, we can do the second reading and vote on the bylaw on Monday. If not, we can defer it to December 18th. And that would be the other option. I do want to stress that I think, at least from everything I've heard from Rob in these meetings, the goal is to start this program, start ramping up so that this program can be put into effect for the big rental cycle, which in Amherst begins in the fall. But registration begins, I believe, even in May.
Renewals start in like
May.
April and May.
Yeah, thank
So,
you. Right.
but the permits are issued July 1 to June 30. And so from Rob, the goal would be to have this in effect for the next permit year, the FY25 permit year, if it passes.
And given the fact that we're going to have some changeover in council, although we're about to recognize one of our new councilors, there's always a little bit of a slow startup period, so that it would be advantageous for Rob if we could get this done before the end of this term.
Yeah, I mean, I really urge us to come to some conclusion and get it done. As a counselor.
Yeah. Let me go to Councillor to be Hegner and then Councillor-elect.
I just wanted to say, I think Bernie said this at an earlier meeting. I think at some point we just have to make a decision and go with it. And we'll have ample opportunity to review what's happened over the next year, or the next 2 years, and come back and say it's working, it's not working, we need to adjust this. But I think at some point we just have to get it done and move forward. So I'm okay with this fee schedule that's in the package. I mean, it's not what I would do ideally, but as a starting point, I think I'm okay with it. And I just think we need to move forward.
Yep.
Yeah, Kathy, I was thinking for a second.
I'll try to stay where Bob just was. And the one amendment I would do to the fee schedule is to lower the initial fee from 250 to 150 and go up on the number of marginal units that you need to make up the difference in revenues. And I'll give up on my inspection side for now, and just, to make it so, Mandy, if I didn't play enough, did I need to go up to 20, on marginal? So it would be the maximum a larger building would pay would be, X. So it's in the scale. So that would be the one change, because the units that are 6 or less are still going to hit the inspection fee and a marginal inspection fee for each of their units. So the first year is still going to be costly for them. So I want to lower on the registration side. So that would be the one fee amendment I would make. And for now, since Mandy said it would be better to bring that up for the whole council do I change the inspection threshold for sampling to 10? And I can make that during the council meeting as a recommendation. I can leave that off the list for us for now. So that would be my friendly amendment to Bob's, I think, motion to recommend the fee schedule as received, the most recent CRC. And Shane is saying, but go down on the 250 to 150, but go up on the number of units to make up the difference. And someone can figure out what that is.
So I'm gonna recognize Mandy in a second, but Kathy, while you're listening, if you draft a motion that you think is a motion that would be appropriate to conclude our discussion, when to put on the table, give you a moment to think about that. Mandy? What are your thoughts?
So I will go through a couple of things. So Kathy's suggestion of going down to 150 for non-owner occupied parcels as a base fee with $50 for each additional unit up to 20 units would create a maximum per parcel there of 1,100, I believe, and would on the spreadsheet require town support of $99,000 approximately. So nearly the entire safe and healthy neighborhood revenue from the strategic partnership agreement. So that's the 150 with an increase on the fee schedule. You've got the permit residential fee A2 would read for all other parcels 150 plus 50 per unit over 1 unit up to a maximum of $1,100 per parcel is how that one would read. That would use nearly all or basically all of the $100,000 from health and safety neighborhoods. To give you another option, if you go down to and this is where I'm still working on stuff, 175, you would, if you go from a base fee of 175 instead of 150 with that same the maximum would then be, if you're going for 20 units, the maximum would be 1,125. You would then use 71,000 of it. But if you wanted to change that maximum down to from 20 units to 15 units again, then you would, I think you would use 85,000. So you could do 150, $150 on the base fee. So A2 could read 150 plus 50 per unit over 1 unit up to a maximum of 1,100 per unit per parcel, and you'd use 100,000 of the 100,000. It could read 175 plus $50 per unit over 1 unit with a maximum of give me a second here, of 875. And that would use 85,000 of the safe and healthy neighborhoods money. Those are two options. I'm just trying to calculate some of the stuff that Kathy said so that the motion would be right depending on what you want. So if you want to go down to 150, you do need to go up to 20 units, that 1,100 max, to be able to generate enough revenue using all of the safe and healthy neighborhood revenue. If you go down to 175 instead of 150 as a base number, then you can choose to add that per unit cost up to 15 units instead of 20 units. And then you would use 85,000 of the 100,000.
Mandy, is it helpful to put numbers in here?
You can, but you have to play with some other sections too. But we can put some in if you'd like to. I can tell you what cells to put them in.
Is that helpful to the committee?
Do we need that for the motion?
No, the motion would actually be on the rental registration fee schedule. It's not on the Excel sheet. And the motion on the fee schedule is section A2.
Okay, I can.
And
That's-
Athena, you can't easily do it because the change Mandy's doing, it is a secondary sheet when
Yeah.
she goes to
Yeah.
something more than 9. So
Yep.
you'll never get to the right number in terms of the fee collection.
There's some extra cells that need changed.
Okay,
But
and
yes,
just
that's
quickly,
the
I
one
want
I was talking about.
to. Okay, and I just want to note that Anna's rejoined. So Mandy, can you just tell me?
So section A2, the first 250, if you change it to 150, you then have to change the maximum of 700 would be maximum of 1100. And what that now reads is that 1100 is up to 20 units. So you would be paying the additional 50 per unit for 19 more units. So you'd pay it for every, that fee would go up until you have, it would stay steady once you've hit 20 units or more on a parcel. The 21st unit would not incur additional
Right.
per unit costs. So that's the one that Kathy recommended. That would use 100,000 of the 100,000.
And that's the one, Mandy, I don't have time to get out a full screen, and I don't have one of those great double things where I can have it open on the other one to just check your math.
So the math is slightly estimated because the rental permit breakdown we have, this is where it gets into problems. We have a 10 to 19 rental units, and there are 19 non-owner occupied parcels with 10 to 19 rental units. And my math is assuming that every single one of them is 19 units. Right. And it's not. And so we can't, once we change the number from 10 to something above that, we can't fully easily estimate how many are at 12 units versus 13 and all. So it's probably a slight overestimation of the
and then
that would come in.
can
But
I
there's
ask
only
you on
19
the,
of those.
so the reinspection fee in the current sheet is 250 is what I'm remembering. Did you have 250 in the one that got sent to us, or was it just 150?
No, the permit fee is 250. The inspection fee, no matter what type of inspection, is 150 in the sheet.
And there's not an easy way of saying reinspection is a higher cost because you don't know how many you're going to do, correct?
So we've calculated potentially some of that. Rob recommended not doing that. His recommendation was do a flat inspection fee. They will charge it for all of the permit required inspections, and they may or may not always charge it for any other inspection, is what he told CRC.
Okay, so if we went in this direction, we're generating a larger shortfall than what you came up with, even though we went up to 20 based on this quick calculation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that, just so everyone understands, that's why I did the frequency, and I'd be willing to go up on the inspection fee to 175. You know, if you did what happens if you do the inspection fee at 175, because the little guys will not be hit as often because the little good guys, the ones that are get a clean record will only get hit. So I wasn't trying to generate a deficit. So just everyone understands that's not what I was trying to do. And I wouldn't want to start the program knowing that in steady state, we're not covering our costs unless UMass does this every year. So
Yeah.
that
And
was
would you-
not, that was never my intention. Yeah.
And when you say cover all your costs, of course, it's covering all the costs, I assume, in year one. What do we do in year two and beyond when salaries and health insurance increases? Bernie?
Yeah, I think where this leads us is we're gonna, we should simply take the document that's in front of us, no, with the 250 rather, that came over, that's posted in the packet, and move that onto the council. Because as it was originally written, this is my understanding, please correct me, as it's originally written, it covers all but maybe $15,000 worth of the safe and healthy neighborhood money. So the CRC's proposal more fully funds the program than any of the alternatives that we've discussed here. People are working with spreadsheets that obviously have lots of formulas in them, and we're winging it. My preference would be then that we move this to the council, and then the council then moves it to where it needs to go, and then we can take a look at how this works. Because we're right now we're plugging numbers in, and I'll pass it 150, but how about 175? But well, maybe do you hear 200? Let's just go with what we've got in front of us as written, and take some time to look at the numbers, because the licensing folks can always come back and suggest change after they have a chance to finesse this and to look a little harder at the math. But I think for Rob's purposes, it's important to get this off the ground. I also agree with Rob that you shouldn't have a reinspection fee, because the temptation there is to count money that you may or may not get.
The reinspection, I assume that the reinspection,
The inspection fee at 150, keeping it that way seems to me to be, I would agree with the CRC with Rob that keeping that figure is there, because that gives them the opportunity to apply that fee each time they go back to do a reinspection if it's necessary. And if you want it to be punitive on the landlord who's a bad actor, then that's the way to do it, because the inspector has to come back 3 times. Well, now you're looking at $450. Hopefully that's real money to whoever owns the offending unit. But at this point, we're not doing, we're guessing. And I would prefer to go with, and I'm assuming that CRC and Rob have done, Mandy's a very thorough person, and I'm assuming that she and her committee and the building inspector, inspection director, have gone over the numbers here time and time and time again. And this is a place to start.
so are we at a point somebody's gonna make a motion? Or I guess Bernie is really suggesting a motion. I'm not sure we've ever determined whether resident members can move or second.
I'm assuming we can't.
I don't think so.
So the motion would be to recommend that you're suggesting, though, would be to recommend to the council that they adopt the fee schedule as recommended by CRC.
Yeah, with the understanding that it can be amended in the future.
I think we all recognize that. you'd put an initial
Andy, is that your motion?
No, haven't made it yet, but I
Okay.
think that I'm getting towards it. To make the motion be that Finance Committee recommends that for the first year of the program, that that the fees be as recommended by CRC. Could write that out as with the name of the committee. And the reason that I would put that forward in that fashion is it would force the council to come back during its first year to revisit the issue, but allow the program to get going. So I'll put that out as a motion. If it's seconded, then we'll discuss it as a motion.
Andy, may I make it's sort of a point of order?
Yes.
The bylaw as written, if adopted, allows the council to set the fees first, and then all other changes to the fees are done by the bylaw, the Board of License Commissioners. So once the council adopts a fee schedule under the current bylaw proposal, if adopted, after the first vote of the council, the fee schedule reverts to the Board of License Commissioners for any subsequent changes.
Good point.
That
Doesn't
was,
much change the motion because you come back to the fact that it would just require that the Board of License Commissioners has to make that decision during the first year as to what the second year fees would be. It would not be council action. Lynn?
I was going to make the same point Mandy Joe did, and that is the way it's written. We basically turn it over to, frankly, the experts who have been setting our other fees and who have been involved in this discussion. For the purpose of discussion, I'm going to second the motion.
Okay. So, Athena, do you have a motion?
I do. I have to recommend that for the first year of the program, the fees be as recommended by the Community Resources Committee.
So further discussion on the motion. Matt, are you just coming back now?
I am just getting back in. Sorry, Andy.
Then you should know that we've had substantial discussion while you're away, that there's a motion on the floor now. And the motion on the floor is to recommend that for the first year that the fee be as recommended by the Community Resources Committee.
Okay, I support that motion.
And well, we're not taken to the point of taking a vote. We're just at that point of seeing if there's anybody else who has something to say on the motion. Kathy we've been discussing a proposal that Kathy had made, which would be an alternative approach that would require, I don't know if you want to state it again one last time, but it would change the number of units to be inspected.
It did two things. It went up on the cap. Instead of 9, it went higher. So you collected more from the registration fee. And it looked for a way of doing fewer inspections. So I still do balanced. And I continue to think that's fair. So I've already taken enough of the committee's time with playing with those two numbers.
And I think that
Mandy is absolutely correct. If you just go up on the number of units and go down on the registration fee, it will not as completely cover costs as what had been proposed. That's why I had to look at the inspection side. But I feel like we're putting more of the burden on the smaller units than we need to do. The smaller owners with smaller total units than we need to,
Right.
that are less able to bear it. But I did my best to try to explain a different approach, and it's clear it's not resonating, so I'm not gonna press the point.
And I was here for that discussion for the spreadsheet, Kathy. So I saw that. And I appreciated your work on it.
Okay.
Andy, I have a comment on this. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate now, but I did have some thoughts on the fee structure, and I have looked at it for a while now. Is now the time, Andy?
Yeah, go ahead, and then because otherwise we'd be at the vote. So go ahead and make your
Well,
comments, please.
I'll just say this briefly because I am going to wind up voting in support of the fee structure as proposed. I think it's a reasonable way for the program to finance itself. And I am really grateful to Mandy Jo and CRC and town staff for all this work. I think there's two really clear problems that this work is solving. One is substandard conditions in some of our rentals, and particularly circumstances where the landlord is at fault and where there's dereliction there. And then we have an incomplete database of rental units, and I think this addresses that. And those are two really important things that this accomplishes. So I am going to support it, but I want to just voice my three areas of concern on this bylaw. The first is just the increase on the head count. Paul used that phrase when he was giving us the financial indicators presentation, and we're talking about adding two additional inspectors, with full benefits onto this team, and then I get the sense that the administrative burden might be fairly high. So I am also thinking that there might need to be an additional administrative support person attached to this at some point as well. I know we haven't seen that, but that's a concern of mine. And then we've had pretty open conversation about the potential cost being passed along to renters, and that's an area of concern for me as well. And then finally, I think this is more of a broad point, but I do worry that the culture we have, the regulatory culture that we have in town, this sort of increases our regulatory and bureaucratic function, which of course is not a bad thing unto itself, but I think is something that we as a town need to be aware of, is that aspect of our governance. One thing that I asked Rob in our very first meeting on this was just to clearly state that town staff, if they suspect a property is in poor condition, they can file their own complaint and conduct their own investigations. Because I think there's a misconception out there that the only way that we can inspect a property is if there's a complaint, and that's true, but that complaint can originate from town staff as well. So, but obviously these are things that are sort of outside of the purview of finance, as Mandy Jo has pointed out. And so I'm not going to not support the motion on those grounds. I've played with the spreadsheets a little bit, and I think it's a sound scheme for financing this. But I wanted to get those out there on the record, Andy. So thank you for the time, and I apologize. I was pulled away.
Okay, thank you. You shared with me that you had that problem. Lynn?
I first of all, I want to thank CRC and Mandy Jo as chair, but I also want to thank Kathy for, listening to and being sensitive to issues we've heard in public comment, and we have heard those comments. Additionally, I want to point out, in fact, in the packet for this year is the annual report from the Board of License Commissioners. And so one of the things that we're looking to them to do is to, as they have been doing with other fees they're in charge of, to assess whether this is the best way to make this work. And in doing that, I want to make sure that they don't lose sight of the goals that Kathy has been trying to advance with her additional model, if you will, with her slight changes to the model. So I think it's terrific that we put this in the hands of the Board of Licensing Commissioners. I think CRC has worked closely with them as they've come forward with that recommendation, and they regularly report to us. So that's all good. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So with that, don't see any other hands, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that we're ready to vote. And does anyone want to request that Athena read the motion again, or are we all settled on it? Seeing no requests, we'll go ahead to the vote. Anna?
I'm going to abstain since I missed the bulk of the discussion today.
Lynn?
Aye.
Bob?
Support.
Matt?
Support.
Bernie?
Or
Kathy? Kathy, did you say
Didn't you hear? No.
you voted no?
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't hear the first, but I heard the second. I'm going to vote yes, and Alicia is absent, so I need to get advice from Athena.
That motion passes with 2 in support, 1 no, and 1
One abstention.
abstention, and 1 absent.
Okay,
Interesting. Okay.
is an interesting vote to report to have to explain, but we'll do the best we can. But it's not going to be able to get done before the Monday meeting, I don't think, Lynn. I think we're pretty well exhausted on our getting our one report out.
Sure. That's fine. I would prefer that we I prefer we try to do it Monday. I mean, especially since
See what I can do.
Yeah.
Working with Kathy, I have to talk to later. See if we think we can together come up with a report, and we'll let you know. It's
Great.
not going to have much time to get circulation to the committee because of the timing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that said, the next thing we're going to have to work on, and we don't really have much time today, so I think the most important thing is to schedule our next meeting. And I believe that we had 2 Fridays that were put down as possibilities. The first, which if I recall, is the a week from today.
That's correct.
Is there anyone who's not available? Let me put it that way.
Can you tell me what date that is?
The 11th.
The
I'm not.
8th.
it's the 8th and the 15th.
Andy,
Yeah.
I just wanted to note that the 8th, the staff holiday gathering is beginning at 3 o'clock. So I would just ask the committee to be aware of that for the staff that are participating in the meeting. The meeting we had scheduled for 1 o'clock.
So we're scheduled, we're scheduled for December 8th and December 15th?
That's what we had planned on, yes. The last council meeting is the 18th.
So I was going to suggest before we get into the make a final decision on this, there are a couple of questions I want to ask everyone on the committee regarding the guidelines. And then I think I would like to work with Kathy's draft, my draft together, and see if we can come up with proposed guidelines and get them out to the committee for the next round of discussion and see how quickly we can handle it. The questions that I have is, can we assume that the proposed operating budget increase for all of the major functional areas, being the elementary and regional schools and municipal functions and library are equal at 3%. So that's one question. Anna?
Sorry, that mute button was further away than I thought. Andy, won't we get a better idea of that after the Four Towns meeting, specifically about the schools, or will that not be related to this at all?
I think that we're trying to give guidance in some ways to the schools. What usually happens is that the finance director at the school then takes our number and plugs it in and makes a recommendation, so that giving some this discussion today will give some guidance to the schools for any final decisions that they're going to make on how they present.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the reason I bring it up is I believe it's been the past 2 years that the schools have come in with requesting more than the 2.5%. And so I want us to take that under advisement in terms of how we're communicating that expectation to the school committee, but then also, what we're bringing to Four Towns in terms of is it reasonable, or are we just setting ourselves up to have to navigate that again for whatever reason?
With
That
a
makes
minor
sense.
note that the financial trends report suggested we could start at 3. Kathy?
Yeah, even though I sent you a draft with that wording in it, Andy, I'd like to have a quick discussion on the library budget, because the fiscal year we're talking about, the library will be physically, assuming we go ahead with the construction, will be completely closed. So I would like to know why we have to have the same increase for the library. So that I would just like to have because I understand it's mainly labor costs that are underneath it, but there are utility costs, there's some supply costs, there's whatever. So I would like to just have enough information to know whether equal makes sense this year, coming fiscal year. And Anna's question about education is, this is the year they lose ESSER. So we've got two things going on, where one we know is going to have a shortfall. So I would just like enough more information to say, do we depart from the historical pattern that are avoided looking at budgets very closely, with a little bit more of a discussion on those two pieces. I trust the projections of revenues, so I think there is no more to be had. We're living within it's 333 or something that does a balance. So I have no problem with that assumption.
I think, I'm going to recognize Lynn just a second. I see your hands up too. I think that if we didn't come in with a recommendation that's based upon just leading with an even percentage, as has been the historical pattern, that we would have to also consider then requesting that the budget coordinating group make a recommendation to the finance committee, and that we do the guidelines with essentially leaving that portion undetermined at the initial phase, and have the new finance committee, as soon as it convenes, get a recommendation from BCG. I don't know if, as a practical way, whether there's another way to handle it. So I just want to put that out onto the table as a part of this discussion. Lynn?
Can I just follow up on that, Andy? The other thing could be that our town manager can do some due diligence and report back to us on some of this, because asking anyone to cut their own budget is a difficult issue. So just trying to do scrutiny. So I raised the library as a question, there won't be utility fee. And so that it was raised as a question rather than what will I do with that? And BCG is a different kind of animal in terms of each group. No one's going to raise their hand and said, sure, I can take 10% less, or I can have a flat budget. I don't think willingly anyway. So that would be another way of writing the wording.
Paul?
Yeah, so I could look into that, Kathy, but my instinct is that there are costs that come in addition, and then there are costs that are taken off. So I will look into that for you.
Thanks.
Lynn?
I just want to review a little bit of what has been the practice in the past, and that is that at the meeting we have in December, the school committee basically will possibly show us two budgets. One is, what would it be if we just kind of maintained everything and, projected out? And I don't know that they're going to go beyond that in the December meeting. It does seem to me, as much as nobody is going to stand up and say, oh, here's my budget, please take it, that we are looking at at least two, and I'm sure if the town wanted to weigh in, they could add in another unknown factor, but we are looking at some pretty serious variations. One is the school and the loss of the ESSER funds, and the second one is, in fact, what impact will the libraries moving to temporary quarters have on their budget? And that, in fact, in my mind, does call for a BCG meeting at a point in time where maybe we have more of those, the more knowledge about that. The library hopefully will be going out, finding space. They'll get a sense of what that space is going to cost. We may get a sense of what the loss of ESSER is going to have on us when we do the December regional meeting. And as we all know, this is a free-floating number until the governor comes forward with their budget sometime in January. So we have a lot of unknowns. I think we need to recognize those in the financial guidelines, but I think we also need to accept the fact that whether or not anybody's going to come forward and says, yes, please take 50,000 from my budget to balance this budget, we still should do that within the recognition that we do have a BCG, and that committee does have the authority to at least have that discussion. Thank you.
Unless Paul is able to give us any guidance, which he said he would try, but he can't assure
Right.
that he will, then we don't have any, I don't know what else we have. Anna?
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate the reference to calling a BCG meeting. I think that was what I was asking for one of the last times that we talked. And this is why I think that there are changes this year. And I think that we need to pull these groups together as we create these guidelines. So I would fully support that, the plan as you outlined it, Andy, with coordinating a BCG meeting and leaving those parts to be finalized after that meeting.
There was some hesitation expressed also about BCG and the political nature that places into the process. We have not had an experience with that in recent years. And so we are really inviting something very different into the process. If we do that, that is something that we've got to resolve at our next meeting. I'm assuming 10.5% for capital, unless there's somebody else that's going to say something different. So that's a second issue, though, that at least needs to be out there for consideration. And then I think the third one I'm thinking about is on the municipal side, is a recommendation that we just say that continuation of current programs is a significant value, and the program should only be cut if there's a strategic reason to do so. As far as that's going to, if so, that's going to leave very little money for anything additional. And the only thing that would seem appropriate to say is that we suggest that the town manager make what he determines to be the most appropriate budget recommendations on May 1st, consistent with the council guidelines that we're giving for goals, so that they essentially follow the council guidance and not trying to incorporate it into the financial guidelines. Paul?
Yeah, I just have to say, I'll catch up with Holly on this later, but I have to, I'm 9 minutes late for another meeting. I got people waiting, so I'm going to sign off now, just to let you know that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Have a good weekend. Kathy?
Okay, the two other items just to have people have on their plate. One is there's been a vote to give the council an increase in stipends. And we have a specific amount of money because it would start in the next fiscal year. So we should put that in the guidelines because, and we have a number to plug in. And I think the draft I sent you, Andy, left a blank because I didn't have time to look at it. And the other part, and I'd be happy to have people react to it, is there is the potential to bring in grant funds where the grant funds support the staff to implement the grants. And so we shouldn't discourage, I would want to be encouraging that type of, self-finance, not just bring in the money, but bring in the money to implement it. And conversely, I would like to start to have a better process. And I wrote some words like this, is before we make a purchase, which everyone likes, even if the council wants it, we do due diligence to talk about all the associated costs. If we go this route, it will require the following additional, whether it's operating costs or demolition costs, that we do a better job of total budgeting before we make an investment decision. And there's one specific example of it. It was driven by the council, but I think the council needs to be better at it. And then our town manager needs to say, hey, by the way, if you want me to do this, it has the following consequences. So I'd just like to put those somewhat in gentle wording in the guidelines.
Do you want to share what the council?
Well, the example that's come up is we voted to use ARPA money, and ARPA money is not free money. I think of it as an alternative tax resource for us that was federal taxes, but we should think of it as we bought a property for a permanent shelter. It looks like it might have toxic substances on the land, so there might be cleanup needed. We don't have the money to demolish the current building, and we don't have the money to build another building, and we don't have the money to operate it. So all of those look like an easy decision to just buy it. So it would just be a decision. There was a fuller picture. It wasn't, Lynn made the comment when we first ran about be careful if you apply for a grant and the grant brings operating costs and other costs, that you look at the full picture of it. You just don't look at, an opportunistic bringing in money. So I'd be writing wording like that, that you think through 2-3 years down the road. But I've also seen a couple other towns on the flip side. There was a terrific example in East Hampton. If they wanted to do an RFP for thinking of surplus property, and they somehow got the state to finance consultant report to really help the town think through what they wanted to do, draft an RFP and help them rate it. And so the town didn't have to staff up for that. They got state money to do it, redevelopment money. So I thought that was a really strategic way of taking what we have as a we don't have enough staff to do that kind of work. And they had an amazing RFP. And if you looked at it, And I thought, who did that work? And it was, they had this consultant that was free to the town in terms of tax resources. So that was a different way of thinking about applying for funds that supplement staffing, that wasn't permanent staff person added on. So I have two different examples that go in different ways. And I don't want to, glorify the guidelines. Just think of these as, being careful. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, I want to mention that we do have a commitment to the possibility of needing to fund a consultant that will work with the 2024 Charter Review Committee. We don't know for sure that we'll need that, but we need to leave that open as a possibility.
And Lynn, that's in the town services side, right? The municipal side of the budget?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Athena?
Lynn stole one of the things I was going to mention. Kathy, I don't, you've referred to the draft that you have written or the changes that you've made to a draft, but I don't see that in any of the SharePoint packets, and I don't think I have it. Now that we've talked about it at the meeting, would you mind sending it to me so I can add it so other members can see?
Sure. Andy had asked us to send any redlined thoughts. So if that's okay with you, Andy, I took the old one and just marked it up. And, I've been really careful of not sharing opinions before people get, so, it has
I
more.
appreciate that. But now that we've talked about it, now that you've talked about it at the meeting, it's okay to share with the committee.
Kathy, it's okay with me.
If it's okay with you, because I know you were working on revisions too, so I'm more than happy to, and I had some strong wording on ARPA money as well, that ARPA money, now's the time to use it for town investments that are they're delayed and in the queue. So it was, let's go for it with roads, just trying to think of we have a capital shortfall in front of us, and we have a potential source of capital money that's one-time money, but that's ideal for capital projects that are one-time spending. So I'm happy to put it in the packet.
Yeah,
and if you could send it to me, Kathy, so I can post it online, that would be great. Thank you.
when you do, just add something along the top that's makes it very clear that this was a draft provided by committee member Councilor Shane for discussion purposes only, or something like that.
And then I had one other quick question, Andy, and that's that we included on the council agenda for Monday a first kind of look at the budget guidelines for council so that the committee can gather feedback for the draft that will come before the council on the 18th. Will you have a draft ready for Monday?
No, there's no draft for Monday.
I would suggest in the absence of a draft, that we include last year's, and that people just give you ideas.
Or we could do a quick report in addition, listing the topics that we discussed today.
Yeah, I looked at the agenda, Lynn. I like doing last year without you have a packed agenda for Monday night. So putting it in the packet saying this is what we're starting with would be, and not making it super short.
Yeah.
Would be great. I mean, I'm just thinking you've got we have potentially a very long meeting.
It ain't just me, baby. It's all of us. Thank you.
I should have said we have.
Thank you.
I'll put last year's in the packet. Thank you.
And then Andy being prepared to discuss what we talked about today is just a great way to get people thinking. And then we've at least had one initial discussion at a council meeting, because the following meeting on the 18th is ostensibly our last.
I know. This is becoming problematic as to whether we're going to be able to get guidelines done before the end of the year. It's going to be a real challenge. So back to the last question, which was the one that we postponed to get the other pieces out, which is finding date for next finance committee meeting. And I would suggest we do it as early as we possibly can. Which would actually, if we could get a, and we'd have to really do a quick kind of poll to the committee, since we have so many members now who are not here, of whether there are any days in the week earlier that we can still do notice on. If we have to do, if we're not going to get responses back to Monday, it's a really Thursday or Friday. Because I don't see that we could get come up with an agreement for Wednesday done in time to make it work.
You're talking about next week?
Yeah.
For the sake of discussion, I'll put out the idea of December 7th at 3.
Andy, if you wanted to try and schedule something on Wednesday, you can always post it, and if it doesn't work, cancel it.
I like the 7th better than the 6th.
I can do
How other people
the
are, but
7th.
7th at 3 works for me. I
Bob,
would,
you were saying?
It works for me too.
I mean, I'm
I
okay
can make
with
that
it.
work.
So it's Thursday. So recognizing the point about staff not being available, Anna?
Yeah, I can do the Thursday at 3. Wednesday, I'm not available.
Andy, are you suggesting Thursday instead of Friday or in addition to Friday?
No, I would say just one, but you had raised the problem that there's the pressure of the staff
the
on
the
Friday.
7th is better for me. I have a school building committee meeting all morning on the 8th. The 7th is just it's better. The 8th is not impossible, but it looked like you just had 1, 2, 3, 4 counselors say the 7th works, and I didn't hear Bob or Bernie say it doesn't work for them. So why
Well,
don't we?
Bob said it does work for him.
Yeah, it works for me.
So
It's marginal for me, but I'm pretty certain I can do it.
so let's just choose, say the 7th at 3.
3. Yeah.
Okay,
And if we have to, we'll hold the 8th at 1, but hopefully not.
And then can you tell me on the week of the 11th, you think we're meeting the 12th and the 15th? No. Yes? Anyway, someone just send me dates to block, because I have to move. I don't have to move anything, but so if we met on the 7th, there's a chance we'd get a draft done. And then Lynn, we're reporting to the council for the 18th, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. And I can meet on the 12th of December. So
That would be a 1 to 3.
that works fine on in my life.
Anna, what about you?
Sorry,
It's-
I'm going back between Zoom and my calendar, and it's a little tough to do quickly. The 12th, at 1, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can make that work if we need it.
Really accommodating us. Yeah.
So we could potentially get it done if we have those 2 meetings, and then people get to see the draft to comment before it gets submitted, right?
Right. I'm also assuming that the carryover memo for the finance committee is close to nothing.
It's the surplus property one we're carrying over.
There's
Right.
that one. There's also streetlights. Once it comes back from the town manager, it'll go to TSO with input from finance. And then waste hauler is also a finance committee input before it comes
Do we
back to
have
council.
to carry over anything from AHRA?
yes.
Yes, that too.
Yeah. Okay, so there is a carryover memo. It would be great if we could do those 2 days, the next Thursday and the Tuesday after.
Okay, it's unlikely I will be at the meeting of the 12th. I will make every effort, but I can't guarantee it.
Bernie, that's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah,
Andy, did you want to keep the,
I can make the 12th.
did you want to keep
you
the
were saying?
15th? Did you want to keep the 15th as well in case you need it?
I'd always keep it.
Okay,
I'd keep it, but I think it's unlikely.
thanks.
I'd put it in the,
Andy, did we do public comment?
yes, we did.
Okay. It was so
Oh,
long.
I
ago, I
think
It was so
therefore-
long ago. Sorry.
we asked for public comment, nobody asked.
It's the best one ever.
So that said, I think that we have concluded the agenda for today, and I've no other unanticipated or business, so I think that we can be adjourned, and anybody who's trying to get down to be at the Merry Maple at 4 o'clock still has time.
Great.
Bye, everyone. Have
Have
a
a
nice
good night.
weekend.
Okay, I'll
Thank you.
talk to you, Kathy.
Thanks.